Hi, welcome back to our channel. And here, I think I have both of my therapies with me. Let me see. Here's Dilly and here's Pippi. And they're both joining me this evening. I'm chatting, as you can hear in the background, as we answer another query from somebody who attended the National Education Show for Wales, where I was a speaker. And somebody has contacted me because I mentioned during my talk about hydrotherapy and how important I felt having a hydrotherapy pool was for a special school. So I am a great proponent of a hydrotherapy pool, and it's a personal thing of mine, but I really feel that it's an essential part of special school. So if you have a new one built, then obviously I would recommend one being installed as part of that. They're not only useful for your students, but what I found is that we ensured that it was used by students throughout the authority, throughout the county, could be in a mainstream school or maybe in another special school that didn't actually have a hydrotherapy pool. And in fact, we did extend to across counties because there were a couple of special schools who didn't have a hydrotherapy pool or were in the process of having one installed, and so they would come and use our pool. Now, we charged a very flat rate, the same as would be charged to somebody going for ordinary swimming pool lessons, plus an addition for a slight addition for the heating of the pool. So it was quite a bargain, I think, really. But why I did it like that was because I'm very passionate about the rights of students with special needs and those who have difficulties that require something like a hydrotherapy pool or something else that we can offer as a therapy to those students. And so I don't see why they should have to pay more for something that other students take for granted. Like a lot of students would go to a swimming lesson down at the pool, cost them a certain amount of money, and that's taken for granted. Well, why should somebody needing a hydrotherapy pool have to pay more? Now, you may disagree with me on that, and that's entirely up to you. This is just my own opinions. So what would I say? I would say that a hydrotherapy pool is an essential part that's needed in a special school. And if you're having a new one, then I would definitely have one installed. I can remember in the past being at a special school where, unfortunately, although the hydrotherapy pool was being used very well for students with PMLD, there were a lot of students with PMLD in that particular school, and so they had most days of the week. It was 4 or in some cases 5 days a week where they actually got to go into the hydrotherapy pool. When you consider that students with PMLD, unless they're using a trampoline or some other different therapeutic interventions where they get the chance to be out of their wheelchair, they could be in the wheelchair a good part of the day. So it's very, hydrotherapy is very beneficial for these students because although there are physiotherapy and different kinds of things that they would benefit from, sometimes they can't do that as a land-based therapy, and it's much easier and far less painful for them to do it in water where there's no feel of falling onto a hard surface, for instance. So we have found it extremely beneficial for our students with PMLD and those with severe learning difficulties as well. I wouldn't necessarily, if you've got a lot of students in your school that have PMLD and SLD, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for students with autism, although you can have students with PMLD and SLD who also have autism. But what certainly I found in a different school where I was assistant head, that the pool was used by every student in the school. And that meant that students with PMLD only got the opportunity once a week to go in the pool. And some of the students with autism and severe behavior problems sometimes refused to get out of the pool. So you would be hiding behind a pillar in the pool, waiting for them to decide to get out, knowing that the bus was waiting to take them home. And that happened to me on several occasions. I I think if you're a special school that caters just for students with, say, autism, and you have the money and the area to install a hydrotherapy pool, then that's entirely up to you. Make sure you've got all the policies in place, risk assessments in place, and all the rest of it to make sure that you can deal with that or any issues that may arise. My personal preference, because I've run schools for mainly PMLD and SLD, and some of those students, as I've said, may have autism, I would try and keep it for their use, because the temperature is very important as well. In the school that I'm talking about, where it was used for students with all different learning differences, the pool temperature was reduced to an ordinary pool temperature, which isn't any good for hydrotherapy. You need the warmth of the hydrotherapy temperature, which is about 34 degrees, I think, so that it's nice and warm, and it's very relaxing. So it's very, very good for those children who have difficulty and have all kinds of spasms and so on. It's the buoyancy and the warmth of the water and the pressure from the water that gives these benefits to our students. Now, the benefits can extend to somebody who's recovering from surgery, and certainly we've been able to use that out of school time for that. People would come along and use it. And certain other conditions that they may benefit from the use of the hydrotherapy pool. Now, there's a particular evacuation method for getting out of the pool, and you have the silver warmth blankets and all this kind of thing that you have to have available somewhere in the pool area that everybody knows about. You have to have an evacuation board on the wall explaining it in detail, but easy to understand, so that people come in there know exactly what's needed if they need to evacuate the pool. And anybody working in the pool has to be trained in the evacuation procedures. And so there's a policy and all the rest on that as well. I could probably get hold of those to you if you wanted those things, and I could probably send them on to you via email if you request those. So that's a hydrotherapy policy and evacuation and all the rest of it that goes along with that. I think risk assessments tend to be very individual, so they tend to be regarding a particular student as to the risk assessments involved in using something like a hydrotherapy pool. So I think that would go by the way that you already do risk assessments, but I would recommend a risk assessment for whatever therapeutic intervention that you're using to make sure that you've covered everything, in the likelihood of something untoward happening. So what else would I say about hydrotherapy pools? Let me just have a look to see if I've missed out anything, because I have written some notes here. Oh yes, contraindications as well. So an open wound or infection or infectious conditions spread by water, for example, warts. Obviously, they're not going to be able to go in the pool if they've got those. Okay. The term hydrotherapy, hydro means water, and refers to a process which uses water at any temperature or form to relieve pain and give treatment. And in my experience, it's been overseen by physiotherapists or occupational therapists. And what tends to happen is that they would or should, doesn't always happen, but should come into the pool to assess that student and to see what particular physiotherapy that can be done in the water should be done with that child. And then they come regularly to update that. Now, I would always recommend that they get back in the water with that student before they update it. I don't think the onus should be on a teaching assistant, because they tend to be teaching assistants working in the pool. Teachers should go in every now and again, say once a term or once every couple of terms if they think that's beneficial, where they go in and assess it for themselves and see for themselves what their student is doing. but it's usually a TA that reports back to the teacher on the progress, and it's usually somebody like a HLTA who would be the manager of the pool, which has certainly been in my case. Now, as well as the manager for the pool, you're going to have a caretaker who needs to be trained in the maintenance of a pool, because there has to be certain chemicals put into the pool every morning, and that has to be monitored. And if anything is slightly wrong in whatever way at all, then the pool is closed until that's sorted. Now, it doesn't happen that often, or certainly hasn't happened that often in my experience of having a fully functioning pool, but it certainly can. Now, another thing I would recommend is, if you're just having a pool put in, is to get a cover. So when we had ours installed, it was installed as part and parcel of the school build. So they didn't ask me if I wanted a cover. There just wasn't a cover. So I managed to, or we managed to raise funds to have a cover installed after about a year that the pool had been open. It's very important, because a cover will keep the warmth in, and then you haven't got to use as much electricity keeping it warm all the time. Okay, I would say, to try and get the most benefits out of the pool, as I said, we had students coming from different schools to access the pool, but the only way that they could access our pool is if we had a report from a physiotherapist saying that the hydrotherapy pool would benefit that particular student. So I would always stress that you can't just have anybody going in and using the pool. As I said earlier on, I have seen it misused in the past. And I think if you're lucky enough to have the luxury of a hydrotherapy pool, then use it properly. Make sure it's being used to its best advantage. So all those people in the authority who require hydrotherapy for their health and well-being get the opportunity of it. And so it's not misused. I mean, students with autism, in a way, if they're able-bodied and so on, perhaps, in my estimation, should be learning how to access the local pool. Now, it may be that you take them through a virtual reality way of traveling to and from the ordinary public pool, and you help them get used to that. And then you start taking them down there, perhaps, and they're not going to go in until they're ready and so on. And then you get them used to going to an ordinary pool. Now, the reason for that is that when they finish school and so on, that's what real life is going to an ordinary pool. They may never have the access to a hydrotherapy pool again. So it is about getting them used to using an ordinary pool. But some students, particularly those with PMLD who are in a wheelchair for the rest of their lives, probably, the only opportunity they've got is and it's beneficial to them, is usually having access to a hydrotherapy pool. And if you've got one in your school, obviously that's just brilliant. And you will have overhead hoists, I would imagine. That would be best. If you can't, for some reason, have overhead hoists, then you should have portable hoists that you can get them in and out of the pool for. And there's obviously manual handling policy that involves that as well. All of these things, all of these documents must be in place before you actually use your hydrotherapy pool, to cover yourself, to cover your staff, and to protect the students and to protect your staff. I mean, one of the things I would say as well is that those staff who may be working in the pool on a regular basis, money out of the school funds should cover the cost of a costume for them. I certainly remember when I was deputy head in a special school, and our students with PMLD got to go in there about 4 times a week. By the end of a couple of months, my swimming costume became see-through, and it was only somebody telling me as I was wheeling the wheelchair back to the classroom, and very kindly enough told me that it was now see-through, that I was able to realise that that's what perhaps the chlorine in the pool did to, or whatever. And as a result, obviously you learn from these things. In my school where I was head teacher, I made sure that costumes were, if they were in the pool all the time, and I certainly had members of staff who were, then they would have a costume, they would get a costume that the school paid for. And then renewed as and when it was necessary, so that they were never put in the embarrassing position that I'd been in. So there are certain things that you would order for a hydrotherapy pool, and there are, I would just go online and search for apparatus for a hydrotherapy pool, you know, different things that you can use. And I would just Google it and try and find, and there'll be lots of places that provide that. I know we had certain magazines that we use, but to be honest, you know, they're probably out of date by now. And you just, I would always say every year, just check again in case there's somewhere that does it cheaper, because they're not cheap things that you have. So the evacuation board is quite expensive, for instance. But what we had as well is we would have pipe music into the pool so that you could feel the music through the water, and you could also hear music when you were in the pool. And again, that could be student choice, where they chose the particular music that they wanted to play, or where you could try out different ones to see where you had the most reaction from those students as to which type of music that they preferred. So what we tended to have is we would have a manager in charge and her assistant, and those two, one would be on the side and one may be in the water. A teaching assistant would come from the class with the student, and then it would be decided who was, that teaching assistant would always go in with them, because when you consider it, they may only be bringing 1 or 2 students from that class, and that teaching assistant maybe only bringing once a week. So that's not a problem. But if you're the pool manager or the manager's assistant, then you may be in that pool every single day. So some kind of rota and system needs to be set up that is approved by the senior management team in the school, and obviously with the agreement of the manager and the manager's assistant. So anything else? Let me just check again whether or not there's anything else I should be referring to. Oh, I would like to say what the manager that we had to say about it. Oh, here we are. She says, I've witnessed many physical benefits of the hydrotherapy pool: increased circulation, reduced muscle spasms, strengthened muscles, and the relief of pain. Just seeing the student or adult happy, relaxed, and smiling and being free to move independently is truly rewarding. For a student or adult to get out of their wheelchair and have the opportunity to change their body position and find freedom of movement and independence brings about physical and psychological well-being which cannot be achieved anywhere else. The ability for students or adults to be independent in the water, to achieve skills that may be difficult or impossible on land, can only have favourable and lasting psychological effects, which boost confidence and aids vocalization. I have witnessed pupils, students, adults walking in the pool with extraordinarily little support from staff. Most of the students' IEP targets that we work on in the hydrotherapy pool are physical or communication targets. For example, to reach out and touch an object floating nearby, to communicate more, and to enjoy taking part in action rhymes and breathing techniques such as humming and blowing with assistance. And I must admit, we did have all of our staff trained in the Halloween method, which you know, if you just Google Halloween, they'll give you some opportunities for training in that. There are other things you can do, Aichi, and Watsu is another one. So there are other different programs that you can do. But I think basically, to start off with, you would have to do the emergency, the evacuation boards, and you would have to do physiotherapy programs with the physiotherapist and get those in motion before you then look towards including Halloween or one of the other things. There's a lovely program that's all about music in the water and feeling the vibrations of the music while you're in the water. That's another one as well. So the advanced multi-sensory equipment that we installed in the hydrotherapy pool include lights, music, bubble machines, and the ICT switch enabled them to use the switch specially made for a pool, and they could press that switch to turn different things on, lights, music, or whatever, and be in control then of their environment, which was very good. So I think that may be an end to this talk on hydrotherapy. I hope it's been beneficial. I hope I haven't left anything out. It's getting quite late now, so I could have done, because I'm hungry and I would like something to eat, and I know my 2 dogs would like something to eat as well. So I hope that helped with hydrotherapy. If you have got a special school and you can, or you think that there's a possibility you can raise funds for a hydrotherapy pool, then then I would highly recommend a hydrotherapy pool in your school.